the allegations Meghan has made are simply not true. Her account does not reflect what actually happened, and it has led the public to a deeply misleading impression. That version of events has no basis in...
The invitation had already been prepared. Meghan expected her return to one of Britain's most recognizable royal entertainment traditions, to become a carefully managed moment of reconciliation. Instead, Prince William made a decision that transformed anticipation into humiliation. Before senior aides could soften the language or move the matter behind palace doors, the prince publicly revoked Meghan's invitation to the royal variety show, and her stunned reaction made one thing unmistakably clear. She had never expected him to go that far. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan understood immediately that this was not simply a lost evening. The royal variety performance, the annual entertainment event attended by senior members of the monarchy in support of the Royal Variety charity, carries enormous symbolic weight, because appearing within the royal party can signal acceptance and continued closeness to the institution. Her proposed attendance had therefore represented something far greater than a theater seat. It had suggested that after years of distance, one carefully controlled doorway might finally be opening again. William closed that doorway himself. During a scheduled announcement setting out the royal party, the prince personally confirmed that Meghan's invitation had been withdrawn and that she would not join the delegation. Before approving the wording, he rejected a softer phrase suggesting ordinary scheduling changes. An aide's documented account of the briefing later described him insisting that the responsibility remain unmistakably his. He knew the decision would be painful. He also knew hiding behind palace language would make the boundary meaningless. Meghan read the confirmation twice before lowering her phone. Disbelief crossed into anger when she asked whether William had personally authorized the announcement. The answer came quickly, yes. That mattered, because arrangements had already moved beyond casual discussion. A senior courtier's internal account recorded that preliminary attendance planning had begun, and both sides had been working with the expectation that she would appear. Harry reacted almost immediately. He called William, demanding to know why his wife had been allowed to believe the invitation remained secure if his brother was prepared to revoke it publicly. The future king did not answer the first call. Harry stared at the unanswered screen, convinced the silence was intentional, and his frustration hardened into something much more personal. Yet William's decision had not truly begun with the royal variety performance. Weeks earlier, Meghan had made a private request involving Catherine that changed how he viewed the entire invitation. What sounded harmless at first had raised a question the prince could not ignore. Was Meghan returning as family, or reaching again toward a royal role she had already left behind? That buried conversation now mattered more than the cancelled invitation itself, because Catherine had heard Meghan's request very differently, and once William learned exactly what had been said, the path toward public rejection had already begun. For Meghan, the invitation represented far more than one evening beneath theater lights. It offered something she had not possessed for years: visible acknowledgement from the royal establishment she had left behind. Harry understood what that recognition meant to his wife. Catherine understood it too. But William saw something else entirely. Where Meghan saw a doorway reopening, the prince saw a test of boundaries, and he had already decided that one misstep would close that doorway before she ever crossed it. Meghan told Harry that attending could prove something simple but powerful. The family might still appear together, without pretending the past had vanished. The Royal Variety Performance, an annual entertainment event traditionally attended by members of the royal family, mattered because public placement around it could suggest closeness to the working monarchy. For her, that did not mean surrendering the independent life they had built. It meant being welcomed without having every gesture treated as a constitutional signal. Harry wanted to believe the same thing, and for a moment, optimism felt possible. Harry still sensed danger beneath the invitation. Late one evening, he admitted that William's agreement felt unusually conditional, almost as though every detail had already been measured. Meghan rejected the suspicion. She told him his brother would never invite her into such a public setting, only to create humiliation later. Yet the future king was already speaking differently behind palace doors. William told Catherine privately that reconciliation could not be allowed to blur official status. A working royal, meaning a family member carrying out formal duties on behalf of the crown, occupied a very different position from a relative attending as a personal guest. The prince feared that one carefully photographed arrival, one receiving line, or one ambiguous introduction could be interpreted as a quiet restoration of duties that had never actually been restored. Catherine felt that tension when she received an early seating briefing. She paused over Meghan's placement near senior members of the family and asked whether the arrangement might be read as something more than simple inclusion. William heard the concern immediately. He then gave advisors 3 private conditions. Meghan could attend as a family guest, she would not join royal receiving duties, and the evening could not be used to suggest future official involvement. Meghan never received those conditions with the same sharp edges. The message reaching her side sounded warmer, broader, almost reassuring. Harry believed the invitation signaled a thaw. She believed it offered dignity. William believed the boundaries were obvious. Catherine then remembered something neither of them could ignore. Weeks earlier, Meghan had approached her after another royal gathering and asked a question that had seemed harmless in the moment. Once the prince heard exactly what had been said, however, the invitation stopped looking like reconciliation and started looking like a test. The older fracture led straight back to Windsor, where one private conversation had quietly changed everything. Weeks before the invitation was revoked, there had been no public confrontation, no dramatic announcement, and no furious exchange between brothers. There had only been a quiet conversation at Windsor, yet that conversation became the trigger for everything that followed. Meghan made a request she believed was practical. Catherine heard something much larger inside it, and when William learned exactly what had been said, he stopped viewing the royal variety appearance as reconciliation and began treating it as a potential challenge to royal boundaries. Meghan approached Catherine during a private Windsor reception after a family gathering and asked whether she and Harry might join the pre-event royal reception connected to the royal variety performance. That reception, a formal gathering where senior royals meet performers and representatives before the main event, carried a different meaning from simply sitting in the audience. Catherine understood the difference immediately. Meghan was not merely asking where she would sit. She was asking whether she could stand inside a space associated with active royal duty. Catherine chose her words carefully. She told Meghan that any decision involving official receiving duties would need to come through William's household. The answer was gentle, but Meghan's expression changed. She asked whether every family appearance now had to be treated as a constitutional distinction instead of a human one. Catherine replied that the issue was not affection, it was clarity, because one public gesture could easily be interpreted as something the family had never formally agreed to restore. Meghan carried that frustration straight to Harry. She told him the exchange made her feel as though she needed permission simply to stand beside people she had once represented the monarchy with. Harry became immediately protective. He said he would speak to his brother himself if Catherine's answer reflected a wider decision. Meghan did not ask him to calm down. She wanted him to understand why the moment had hurt. Catherine spoke to William later that evening and gave him a direct account of the conversation. She made clear that she was not asking for Meghan to be excluded. Her concern was that expectations were expanding before anyone had defined the limits. William went quiet, walked away, then asked one precise question: was she asking to attend or to represent? William became even more guarded when an aide later documented additional questions from Meghan's team about arrival timing, press positioning, and whether she would enter close to the senior royal party. Each question alone seemed manageable. Together, they looked to him like something larger taking shape. William refused to cancel immediately. He told Catherine he would speak to Meghan himself. If she accepted the distinction, the invitation would remain. If she challenged it, he would end the arrangement. That decision put them face to face, with nowhere left to hide. When William finally faced Meghan, there were no cameras, no cheering crowds, and no carefully rehearsed public smiles. The conversation was supposed to remove ambiguity. Instead, It exposed how differently the two of them understood the same invitation. William believed he was protecting the future monarchy from confusion. Meghan believed she was being deliberately reduced in front of a family she once represented. And within minutes, a single sentence turned restraint into confrontation. "This was an invitation," William told her, "not a royal return." William began calmly. He wanted the matter settled person to person, not through competing teams or carefully worded messages. Harry sat nearby, already tense, while Meghan listened without interrupting. The prince explained that she was welcome as a private family guest, but she would not join the receiving line, the official arrival, or duties reserved for working royals. A receiving line, in simple terms, is the formal sequence in which senior members greet performers, guests, or representatives on behalf of the monarchy. To him, the distinction was necessary because public appearances could easily blur where family ended and official duty began. Meghan challenged him almost immediately. She asked why she had been invited at all, if every visible sign of inclusion had to be stripped away. She told William that reconciliation meant very little if she was expected to appear close enough to suggest warmth, but distant enough to make her exclusion obvious. The future king answered that reconciliation could not mean rewriting choices already made, and the tension sharpened. Harry moved forward when Meghan suggested the restrictions existed, partly to protect Catherine's position. William's voice hardened. He told her Catherine had nothing to do with the decision, and that dragging old tensions into the room only proved why clarity was necessary. Harry cut in, telling his brother to leave his wife out of what he called a manufactured rivalry. For several seconds, none of them softened. Meghan then refused the condition William considered essential. She would not agree to enter separately from the senior royal group if the purpose was to make her exclusion visible. The prince told her that without a clear agreement, the invitation could not remain. She stared at him, convinced he was bluffing, then stood and said he would never risk creating that kind of public spectacle. Harry left with her before compromise could be reached. William stayed behind. When Catherine entered after learning the discussion had collapsed, he looked toward the chair Meghan had just left and spoke with sudden finality. "Then we stop it now." But canceling the invitation was only the beginning. The next question was far more dangerous. Did William actually have the authority to make that decision stick? The argument could have ended as another private family rupture. Instead, William turned it into policy. That raised an immediate question inside the royal household. Could the prince personally remove Meghan from an event traditionally associated with the crown? The answer exposed how dramatically the balance inside the family had shifted. Charles still wore the crown, but operational responsibility around the younger royal household had increasingly moved toward William, and this time, the future king was prepared to use every inch of that authority. Charles received the briefing after William made his decision. The document explained that the prince controlled attendance and public positioning for his own household at the Royal Variety engagement, meaning the planned group representing his branch of the family. Meghan's place sat inside that delegation. It was not a separate command issued personally by the sovereign. The king read the summary, removed his glasses, and asked whether his son had already committed himself publicly. William had not yet spoken outside the palace, but the announcement was ready. Charles understood immediately what reversing it would mean. The monarch could intervene, but doing so would openly overrule the future king in an area he had been trusted to manage. That would not simply restore Meghan's seat. It would weaken William's authority before the same household expected to follow him in the years ahead. Charles still disliked the method. In a private conversation, he told his son that boundaries could be enforced without making Meghan feel publicly rejected. William answered that private ambiguity was exactly what had created the problem. If the palace softened everything behind vague wording, he argued, nobody would know where the line actually stood. Catherine carried a different burden. She told William she feared her account of the Windsor conversation had helped push him toward cancellation. The prince stopped her immediately. She had not asked for Meghan to be excluded, he said, and she would not carry responsibility for a decision he had made himself. Charles finally chose not to countermand him. After a long pause, the king accepted that restoring the invitation would turn a family disagreement into a direct clash over authority. William then rejected advisors' suggestion to blame revised attendance arrangements. If the choice was his, he said, the responsibility would be his too. Harry learned the full sequence afterward. His anger changed direction at once. William had withdrawn the invitation, but Charles had known, had possessed the power to object, and had stayed silent. To Harry, that silence felt less like neutrality than permission itself. That realization transformed the conflict. What began with one theater seat was now threatening every remaining bridge between the Sussexes and the palace. The announcement lasted only moments. The consequences began immediately. Meghan's name disappeared from planning notes. Harry abandoned a conversation with palace aides halfway through. Charles received a message from his younger son that he did not answer for nearly an hour, and Catherine, who had feared confusion from the original invitation, now watched something worse unfold. The boundaries were finally clear, but the family paying for that clarity looked more divided than it had before. Meghan's place was removed from the royal seating arrangement within hours. Her arrival coordination was cancelled, and staff were instructed that no Sussex participation should appear in the official royal variety preparations. The royal seating arrangement, the planned order showing where members of the family and invited guests would sit, mattered because placement itself carried meaning. Harry reacted before anyone could soften the change. He told palace staff he would not attend without his wife. To him, accepting his own seat after hers had been withdrawn would make him part of the humiliation. Meghan sat with Harry after the announcement and turned the printed schedule face down on the table. She admitted the cancellation itself hurt less than the way William had chosen to own it publicly. Distance she had expected. Coldness she understood. But deliberate rejection, attached openly to the future king, felt different. Harry listened without interrupting, then told her he understood exactly why the wording had cut so deeply. Charles felt the fallout next. Harry sent him a short message accusing him of allowing William to turn reconciliation into punishment. The king read it twice and remained silent. Camilla asked whether he intended to answer. The monarch said he did not yet know what reply could repair anything, because defending William would inflame Harry, while criticizing his elder son would fracture the authority he had just allowed to stand. Catherine confronted William with the cost. She told him he had won the boundary argument but might have destroyed any chance of a calm family appearance for months. The prince answered quietly that a false reconciliation would have been worse. He believed clarity now would prevent deeper confusion later, even if the price was immediate pain. Meghan nearly answered publicly. Her advisors prepared language stressing that she had accepted the invitation in good faith, but Harry urged restraint. He warned that an angry statement would let the palace present the dispute as proof William had been right to draw the line. Harry chose something riskier instead. He sent his brother one direct message. No aides, no Catherine, no Meghan, no father. Just the two of them. William agreed. For the first time, the palace noise disappeared, leaving two brothers alone with one brutal question. Had the future king protected the monarchy, or wounded the family again? There was no audience for what came next. Harry did not arrive as Meghan's spokesman, and William did not enter carrying the authority of the future king. For one uncomfortable hour, they were simply brothers confronting the damage beneath the headlines. Harry wanted his brother to admit the public cancellation was cruel. William wanted Harry to admit Meghan's expectations had crossed the boundary they had agreed to respect. Neither received the apology he expected, but both finally heard something the public argument had buried. Harry stayed standing when the meeting began. William asked him twice to sit before he finally did. No aides were present, no spouses waited inside the room, and no recording device preserved what followed. That mattered because every earlier disagreement had been filtered through statements, teams, or royal procedure. A working royal, meaning a family member carrying out official duties on behalf of the crown, was at the heart of the dispute. But this conversation was no longer about titles. It was about whether two brothers could still speak without turning each sentence into policy. Harry told William that Meghan had never believed one invitation restored her former role. She wanted dignity, he said, not rank. She wanted to attend without every step being treated as a warning that she no longer belonged. The prince listened, then admitted something Harry had not expected. Attaching his own name publicly to the cancellation had guaranteed that Meghan would experience it as personal rejection. Harry seized on the admission. That, he said, was exactly why the decision had felt unforgivable. Yet after a long silence, he conceded something too. The request involving receiving duties should have been discussed directly. Questions about arrival order, press access, and positioning had grown through separate teams until they looked larger than Meghan intended. William finally exposed the fear beneath his anger. He said the problem was never whether Meghan could stand beside the family for one evening. His fear was precedent. The risk that one blurred appearance would later be treated as proof that official roles had quietly restarted without anyone openly making that decision. Harry understood the logic, even if he still hated the outcome. William would not restore the invitation. On that point, he did not move. But the future king offered one concession. Any future family invitation would state its boundaries clearly from the beginning. No warm welcome first, then sudden restrictions later. No ambiguity that could turn expectation into humiliation. Harry returned to Meghan with that message. He told her the invitation was still gone, but William had admitted the handling caused unnecessary pain. Meghan listened without interrupting. By morning, she had decided what to do with that admission. And the palace was about to discover that silence could be more powerful than retaliation. By sunrise, Britain expected another royal war. Commentators prepared for competing statements. Newspapers built front pages around William's extraordinary intervention. Social media split instantly between those praising firm boundaries and those condemning public humiliation. Yet the most powerful response came from the person at the center of the storm. Meghan did not attack William. She did not release the prepared rebuttal. And that silence forced the public to focus not on another argument, but on the severity of the prince's decision itself. Meghan sat beside Harry, while advisors presented a completed response. The statement defended her acceptance of the invitation, and made clear that she had entered discussions in good faith. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's central working headquarters, and the institution often used to communicate official royal positions, refused to expand on the dispute. William's household confirmed only that the final royal variety delegation reflected his decision. Charles released nothing. The silence from every direction made Meghan's next move even more powerful. Meghan read the draft once, then pushed it back. She told Harry that releasing it would only keep the humiliation alive. He remained angry and wanted the public to understand what had happened, but he agreed. For the first time since the cancellation, they chose not to answer the palace on its own battlefield. William learned of that decision during a briefing. He had expected anger, perhaps even a public accusation. Instead, Meghan gave him nothing to challenge. Catherine noticed the change in his expression and asked whether he had expected a fight. The prince admitted that part of him had. Her refusal to provide one changed the emotional weight of his decision, because the withdrawal now stood alone without an immediate counterattack to distract from it. Britain saw that weight the next morning. A major London newspaper carried William on its front page beneath the stark headline, "The Invitation Withdrawn." Outside Buckingham Palace, tourists and royal watchers gathered around newspaper stands, while television crews framed the controversy as a defining clash between family membership and royal duty. Some praised the future king for drawing a firm line. Others argued that once Meghan had been invited, removing her publicly had crossed into unnecessary humiliation. Charles understood the danger of that debate. Before the performance, the king told William privately that whatever message he wanted to send had already been delivered. Catherine heard the same tension in his silence. Meghan and Harry would not attend. No reversal was coming. When Royal Variety Night finally arrived, the argument had already changed. The question was no longer whether William had the power to exclude Meghan. He had proved that. The final test was whether victory would feel like triumph, or like something far more painful, once the empty place became impossible to ignore. The royal variety performance went ahead without Meghan. There was no surprise arrival, no 11th hour reconciliation, and no attempt by Charles to reverse William's decision. Yet the absence became impossible to ignore, precisely because everyone knew a place had once been intended for her. For William, the evening proved that the monarchy could enforce its boundaries. For Meghan, it proved those boundaries could still wound. And for Harry, it finally exposed the price of trying to remain family after leaving the institution. William attended with Catherine as planned, and the cancellation stood exactly as announced. The Royal Variety Performance, a major annual entertainment event attended by senior royals in support of the Royal Variety charity, had become something much larger than a night of performance. It now carried the weight of a decision that separated family access from official royal standing. Meghan and Harry stayed away, and the palace made no attempt to invent a softer explanation for their absence. Charles had already accepted that reality. Before the engagement, the king told William privately that he would not reopen the argument. The monarch made one thing clear: authority did not end with making the decision. It also meant carrying the emotional cost of it. William listened without defending himself. He had wanted clarity, and now he had it. Catherine noticed the difference after the performance. She asked William whether he still believed he had done the right thing. The prince answered yes, but his certainty came without celebration. He told her that something could be necessary and still hurt. Catherine understood exactly what he meant. The boundary had held, but nobody inside the family had walked away untouched. Meghan reached her own conclusion with Harry. Watching the coverage from afar, she told him she no longer wanted invitations that forced her to guess whether she was being welcomed as family or measured as an institution. Harry agreed. They would stop chasing symbolic returns that left them exposed to the same uncertainty. William's decision had finally clarified the relationship. Harry and Meghan could remain family, but public appearances beside the working monarchy would no longer be allowed to suggest that their former official roles had quietly returned. Meghan's refusal to retaliate mattered just as much. The future king gained the boundary he wanted, while she kept control over how she left the confrontation. That became the final verdict. The cancelled invitation was never really about one seat. William chose institutional clarity over emotional comfort. Meghan chose dignity over another public war. Neither side truly won. The monarchy became clearer, but the family became more distant. There was nothing left to reverse. The invitation stayed cancelled, Meghan stayed away, and the uncertainty finally ended. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.